Now, tonight's broadcast of Suspense is a little bit different. We're going back to show number 648. It was originally aired on May 1st, 1956, and the title is The Waxwork. It starred William Conrad. It was adapted for Suspense by Mel Dinelli from 1931 short story by Alfred Barraz. It was produced and directed by Anthony Ellis. The music tonight was by Lucien Moraweck and conducted by Wilbur Hatch on the original broadcast. Now, we don't have the original broadcast in our collection, but what we do have is a recreation of this show done for a series called Good Evening. It was a Saturday night series done out of Minnesota during a hiatus in the career of a Prairie Home Companion, hosted by Noah Adams. Returning to recreate the role and story from the 1956 broadcast was William Conrad. So the show was recorded in 1988 in December and is The Waxworks. It's tonight's episode of radio's outstanding Theater of Thrills, the 1988 recreation of a May 1st, 1956 show, Show 648, The Waxwork. A reporter gets the honors of spending the night in a wax museum. It's a solo performance by William Conrad on Suspense.
Going to take you back into the days of radio now. You may have noticed a somewhat large orchestra up here, and also something I always wanted to have in my room as a kid. Peter, hit that bass drum there just once. Just whack it. I want to hear it. And now the gong. Ooh. We're going to present a recreation of a CBS radio Suspense broadcast that was on the air 32 years ago with the same actor who performed it then. It lasts 28 or 29 minutes, depending on his mood. As the CBS announcer said on that evening, Suspense brings you what we feel is a particularly unusual and absorbing story. No actors other than Mr. William Conrad will appear in this presentation. He's going to do all the voices. So if the lights are down and you have somebody close by you can grab, we'll start this. It's a study in terror which has few equals. Now starring Mr. Conrad, here is tonight's suspense play by Mr. A.M. Burridge, The Waxwork.
While the uniformed attendants of Mariner's Waxworks were ushering the last stragglers through the great glass-paneled double doors, the manager sat in his office interviewing Raymond Houston. The manager was speaking.
Oh, there's nothing new in your request, sir. In fact, we refused it to many different people, mostly young bloods who try to make bets, about 3 times a week, I should say. We have nothing to gain and something to lose by letting people spend the night in our murderer's den. And if I allowed it and some young idiot lost his senses, what would be my position, huh? But your being a journalist somewhat alters the case.
Houston smiled. I suppose you mean that journalists have no senses to lose.
No, not that, of course. But one imagines them to be responsible people. Besides, we have something to gain here. Publicity and advertisement.
Yes, exactly, said Houston. And there I thought we might come to terms. The manager smiled.
Oh, I know what's coming. You want to be paid twice, do you? You know, it used to be said years ago that Madame Tussaud would give a man 100 pounds for sleeping alone in the Chamber of Horrors. Well, I hope you don't think that we've made any such offer. What is your paper, Mr. Houston?
Well, I'm freelancing at present, sir. Working on space for several papers. However, I would find no difficulty in getting the story printed, I'm sure. The Morning Echo would use it like a shot. A night with Mariner's murderers. No life paper could turn it down.
Yes. How do you propose to treat it?
Well, I shall make it gruesome, of course, sir. gruesome with just a saving touch of humor. The manager nodded and offered Houston his cigarette case. Very well, Mr. Houston. You get your story printed in the Morning Echo, and there'll be a 5-pound note waiting for you when you care to come and call for it. But first of all, you must realize that it's no small ordeal that you're proposing to undertake. I'd like to be quite sure about you, and I'd like you to be quite sure about yourself. I own I shouldn't care to take it on. I should hate having to sleep down there alone among them. Why? Asked Houston. Oh, I don't know. Any reason is really nothing at all. I just don't believe in ghosts, that's all. And if I did, I should expect them to haunt the scene of their crimes or where their bodies are laid instead of a cellar which happens to contain their waxwork effigies. It's just that I couldn't sit alone among them all night, where they're seeming to stare at me the way they do. After all, they represent the lowest and the most appalling types of humanity. The whole atmosphere of the place is unpleasant. And if you're susceptible to atmosphere, sir, I warn you that you're in for a very uncomfortable night. Houston had known that from the moment when the idea first occurred to him. His soul sickened at the prospect, but he had a wife and a family to keep, so here was a chance not to be missed, with price of a special story in the Echo and a 5-pound note. Besides, if he wrote the story well, it might lead to an offer of regular employment. The manager smiled at him and rose. Well, I think the last of the people must have gone by now. Oh, there is one condition I'm afraid I must impose upon you, sir. I must ask you not to smoke. We had a fire scare down on the murderer's den this evening. I don't know who gave the alarm, but whoever it was a false one. Fortunately, there were very few people down there at the time, or there might have been a panic. Now, if you're ready, we'll make a move. He led the way through an open barrier and down ill-lit stone stairs which conveyed a sinister impression of giving access to a dungeon. In a passage at the bottom were a few preliminary horrors, such as relics from the Inquisition, a rack taken from a medieval castle, branding irons, thumbscrews, and other mementos of man's cruelty to man. Beyond the passage was the murderer's den. It was a room of irregular shape with a vaulted roof and dimly lit by electric lights burning behind inverted bowls of frosted glass. It was by design an eerie and uncomfortable chamber. A chamber whose atmosphere invited its visitors to speak in whispers. The waxwork murderers stood on their low pedestals with numbered tickets at their feet. Recent notorieties rubbed dusty shoulders with the old favorites. Patel, the murderer of Weir, stood as if frozen in the act of making a shop window gesture to young Bywaters. And there was Lefroy, the poor half-baked little snob who killed for the gain so that he could ape the gentleman. Within 5 yards of him sat Mrs. Thompson, that erotic romanticist hanged to propitiate British middle-class matronhood. Charles Peace, the only member of the vile company who looked uncompromisingly and entirely evil, sneered across the gangway at Norman Thorne. Brown and Kennedy, the two most recent additions, stood between Mrs. Dyer and Patrick Mahan. The manager walking around with Houston pointed out several of the more interesting of the unholy notabilities. And that's Crippen. I expect you recognize him. Insignificant little beast who looks as if he couldn't tread on a worm. And that's Armstrong. Looks like a decent, harmless country gentleman, doesn't he? And that's old Vaquier. Can't miss him, of course, because of his beard. And this one... Who's that? Houston asked in a whisper.
Yeah. Come here, my boy. Have a look at him. This is our star turn. He's the only one of the bunch who hasn't been hanged.
The figure which Houston had indicated was that of a small, slight man, not much more than 5 feet in height. It wore little wax mustaches, large spectacles, and a caped coat. There was something so exaggeratedly French in its appearance that it reminded Houston of a stage caricature. He could not have said precisely why the mild-looking face seemed to him so repellent, but he already had recoiled a step, and even in the manager's company it cost him an effort to look again. "But who is he?" he asked.
That,
said the manager,
is Dr. Baudette.
Houston shook his head doubtfully. I think I've heard the name, but I forget in connection with what. The manager smiled.
You'd remember better if you were a Frenchman, my boy. You know, for some long while, that man was the terror of Paris. He carried on his work of healing by day and of throat-cutting by night. He killed for the sheer devilish pleasure that it gave him to kill, and always in the same way, with a razor. After his last crime, he left a clue behind him, which set the police upon his track. But they were much too clever for them. When he realized that the coils were closing about him, he mysteriously disappeared. And ever since, the police of every civilized country has been looking for him. There's no doubt that he managed to make way with himself, and by some means which has prevented his body coming to light. 1 or 2 crimes of a similar nature have taken place since his disappearance, but he is believed almost for certain to be dead, and the experts believe these recrudescences to be the work of an imitator. It's queer, isn't it, Mr. Houston, how every notorious murderer has imitators?
Houston shuddered and fidgeted with his feet. I don't like him at all. What eyes he has.
Yes. This figure's a little masterpiece. You'll find the eyes bite into you. That's excellent realism, then, for Baudette practiced mesmerism and was supposed to mesmerize his victims before dispatching them. And indeed, had he not done so, it's impossible to see how small a man could have done this ghastly work. There were never any signs of a struggle. Yes, what's the matter?
Oh, nothing. I just thought I saw him move, said Houston with a catch in his voice. The manager smiled.
Oh, you'll have more than one optical illusion before the night's over, I expect, sir. Well, I'm sorry I can't give you any more light because all the lights are on. For obvious reasons, we keep this place as gloomy as possible. Well, Mr. Houston, good night. Houston wheeled his swivel chair, a heavy one upholstered in plush, a little way on the central gangway, and deliberately turned it so that its back was toward the effigy of Dr. Baudette. For some undefined reason, he liked Dr. Baudette and his companions. Busying himself with arranging the chair, he was almost lighthearted. But when the manager's footfalls had died away and a deep hush stole over the chamber, he realized that he had no slight ordeal before him. The dim, unwavering light fell on the rows of figures which were so uncannily like human beings that the silence and the stillness seemed unnatural and even ghastly. He missed the sound of breathing, the rustling of clothes, the 101 minute noises one hears when even the deepest silence has fallen upon a crowd. And the air was as stagnant as water at the bottom of a standing pond. It must be like this at the bottom of the sea, he thought. He faced the sinister figures boldly enough.
They were only waxworks. So long as he let that thought dominate all others, he promised himself that all would be well. It did not, however, save him long from the discomfort occasioned by the waxen stare of Dr. Baudet, which he knew was directed upon him from behind. The eyes of the little Frenchman haunted and tormented him, and he itched with desire to turn and look. My nerves have already started, he thought, and another voice in his brain spoke to him. It's because you're afraid that you won't turn around and look at him. The two voices quarreled silently for a moment or two, and at last Hewson slewed his chair around just a little and looked behind him. Among the many figures standing in stiff, unnatural poses, the effigy of the dreadful little doctor stood out with a queer prominence, perhaps because a steady beam of light beat straight down upon it. Hewson flinched before the parody of the mildness which some fiendishly skilled craftsman had managed to convey in wax, met the eyes for one agonized second, and then turned again to face the other direction. He's only a waxwork like the rest of you, Hewson muttered defiantly. You're all only waxworks. They were only waxworks, yes. But waxworks don't move. Not that he had seen the least movement anywhere, but it struck him that in a moment or two, while he had looked behind him, there had been the least subtle change in the grouping in the figures in front. Crippen, for example, seemed to have turned at least 1 degree to the left, or, thought Hewson, perhaps the illusion was due to the fact that he had not slewed his chair back into its exact original position. Oh, but there were Brown and Kennedy, too. Surely one of them had moved his hands. Hewson held his breath for a moment, and then he drew his courage back to him as a man lifts a weight. He took a notebook from his pocket and wrote quickly, memo. Deathly silence, unearthly stillness of figures, like being at the bottom of the sea. Hypnotic eyes, Dr. Baudet. Figures seem to move when not being watched. He closed the book suddenly over his fingers and looked around quickly and awfully over his right shoulder. He had neither seen nor heard a movement, but it was as if some sixth sense had told him to be aware of one. He looked straight into the vapid countenance of Leroy. It smiled vacantly back as if to say, it wasn't I. No, of course it wasn't he, or any of them. It was his own nerves. Or was it? Then why all that silent unrest about him? A subtle something in the air which did not quite break the silence and happened whichever way he looked, just beyond the boundaries of his vision. He swung around quickly to encounter the mild but baleful stare of Dr. Baudet, and then without warning he jerked his head back to stare straight at Crippen. He'd nearly caught Crippen that time. You better be careful, Crippen, and all the rest of you. If I do see one of you move, I'll smash you to pieces. Do you hear? He ought to go, he told himself. Already he'd experienced enough to write the story, or 10 stories for the matter of that. Well, then why not go? The Morning Echo would be none the wiser as to how long he'd stayed, nor would it care so long as his story was a good one. Yes, but the manager, one never knew. Perhaps the manager would quibble over that 5-pound note which he needed so badly. He wondered if his wife were asleep or if she were lying awake and thinking of him. She'd laugh when he told her that he had imagined. This was a little too much. It was bad enough that the waxwork effigies of murderers should move when they weren't being watched. But it was intolerable that they should breathe. Somebody was breathing. Or was it his own breath, which sounded to him as if it came from a distance? He sat rigid, listening, straining, until he exhaled with a long sigh. It was his own breath after all. Or if not, something had divined that he was listening and had ceased breathing simultaneously. Houston jerked his head swiftly around and looked all about him out of haggard and hunted eyes. Everywhere his gaze encountered the vacant, waxen faces, and everywhere he felt that just by some least fraction of a second he had missed seeing a movement of a hand or a foot, a silent opening, a compression of lips, a flicker of eyelids, a look of human intelligence now smoothed out. They were all like naughty children in a classroom, whispering, fidgeting, laughing behind their teacher's back, but blandly innocent when his gaze was turned on them. No, this would not do. This distinctly would not do. He must clutch at something, grip with his mind upon something which belonged essentially to the workaday world, to the daylight London streets. He was Raymond Houston, an unsuccessful journalist, a living and breathing man, and these figures grouped around him were only dummies, so they could neither move nor whisper. What did it matter if they were supposed to be lifelike effigies of murderers? They were only made of wax and sawdust and stood there for the entertainment of morbid sightseers and thumb-sucking trippers. That was better. Now, what was that funny story which somebody had told him in the Falstaff pub yesterday? Yes. He recalled part of it, but not all. The glaze of Dr. Burdett urged, challenged, and finally compelled him to turn. Houston half turned and then swung his chair so as to bring himself face to face with the wearer of those dreadful hypnotic eyes. His own eyes were dilated, and his mouth, at first set in a grin of terror, lifted at the corners of a snarl. And then Houston spoke and woke 100 sinister echoes. You moved! Damn you, you moved! I saw you! You moved! Then he sat quite still, staring straight before him, like a man found frozen in the Arctic snows. Dr. Burdett's movements were leisurely. He stepped off his pedestal with the mincing care of a lady alighting from a bus. The platform stood about 2 feet from the ground, and above the edge of it, a plush-covered rope hung in arc-like curves. Dr. Burdett lifted up the rope until it formed an arch for him to pass under, stepped off the platform, and sat down on the edge facing Houston. And then he nodded and smiled and said, Bonsoir. Monsieur Houston, you parle français? No? Oh, well, it does not matter. Good evening. I need hardly tell you that not until I heard the conversation between you and the worthy manager of this establishment did I suspect that I should have the pleasure of a companion here for the night. Oh, you cannot move or speak without my bidding, but you can hear me perfectly well. Something tells me that you are, shall I say, nervous. My dear sir, I have no illusions. I am not one of those contemptible effigies miraculously come to life. I am Dr. Budet himself. He paused, coughed, shifted his legs. Pardon me, but I am just a little bit stiff. Please, let me explain. Circumstances with which I need not fatigue you have made it desirable that I should live in England. I was close to this building this evening when I saw a policeman regarding me. I thought a little too curiously. I guessed that he intended to follow and perhaps ask me embarrassing questions. So I mingled with the crowd and came in here. I bought my admission to the chamber in which we now meet, and an inspiration showed me a certain means of escape. I raised a cry of fire, and when all the fools had rushed to the stairs, I stripped my effigy of the caped coat which you behold me wearing, donned it, hid my effigy under the platform in the back, and took its place on the pedestal. The manager's description of me, which I had the embarrassment of being compelled to overhear, was biased but not altogether inaccurate. Clearly, I am not dead, although it is as well that the world think otherwise, no? His account of my hobby, which I have indulged in for years, though the necessity of less frequently of late, was in the main true. For you see, the world is divided between collectors and non-collectors. With the non-collectors, we are not concerned, eh? The collectors collect anything according to their individual tastes, from money to cigarette cards, from Mars to matchboxes. I collect throats. He paused again and regarded Houston's throat with an interest mingled with disfavor. I am obliged to the chance which brought us together tonight. Perhaps it would seem ungrateful to complain. From motives of personal safety, my activities have been somewhat curtailed of late years, and I am glad of this opportunity of gratifying my somewhat unusual whim. But you, sir, you have such a skinny neck. If you will overlook a personal remark, I should never have selected you from choice. I like men with thick necks. Thick, red necks. He fumbled in an inside pocket and took out something which he tested against a wet forefinger, and then proceeded to pass gently to and fro across the palm of his left hand. This is a little French razor. The blade, you will observe, is very narrow. They do not cut very deep, but deep enough. In one just little moment you will see for yourself, no? And now I shall ask you the little civil question of all polite barbers. Does the razor suit you, sir? He rose up, a diminutive but menacing figure of evil, approached Houston with the silent, furtive step of a hunting panther. You will have the goodness to raise your chin just a little bit, huh? Oh, thank you. No, just a little bit. Un soupçon more, huh? Thank you. Merci, monsieur. Merci. Ah, merci.